Pam Bondi and Sheldon Whitehouse collided in a way no one in that hearing room was prepared for. And the first question he asked hit with the force of a warning siren. Would the next Attorney General allow an enemies list inside the Department of Justice? That single phrase froze the room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it carried the weight of every fear people have about what happens when power stops being neutral and starts being personal. And from the moment Whitehouse asked it, the hearing shifted into something far bigger than a routine confirmation.
Attorney General, correct?
Senator, the Attorney General's office in Florida is the third largest in the state, approximately 1,400 employees and approximately 400 lawyers. Only California and Texas are our bigger offices.
And you were responsible
yes.
for hiring into that office while you were Attorney General?
Yes.
Would you have hired someone into the Florida Attorney General's office who you knew had an enemies list?
Senator, to cut to the chase, you're clearly talking about Kash Patel. I don't believe he has an enemies list. He made a quote on TV, which I have not heard. I saw your sign, or Senator Durbin's sign, about Kash. But I know that Kash Patel has had 60 jury trials as a public defender, as a prosecutor. He has great experience in the Intel Department, Department of Defense. I have known Kash, and I believe that Kash is the right person at this time for this job. You'll have the ability to question Mr. Patel.
And I'm questioning you right now
do.
about whether you will enforce an enemies list that he announced publicly on television.
Oh, Senator, I'm sorry. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice.
Thank you. The FBI's, what is the FBI's role in national security and counterterrorism, and how important is that role?
You know, Senator, I believe now more than ever, counterterrorism is so important and vital in our country. We are facing such incredible threats here and abroad. If I'm sure many of you saw former FBI Director Wray's interview on 60 Minutes, he talked about the threats that, frankly, again, I don't have my security clearance, but the threats facing us, Senator, from China right now that are so great, with the sleeper cells within our country.
Given that importance, is it responsible to call for shutting down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work? And will you, as Attorney General, impede or shut down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work?
Senator,
Two questions.
Senator, I believe that national security is vital right now for our country on so many fronts. I could continue to discuss many others.
And the FBI's role in that?
And the FBI plays a vital role in counterterrorism
which you
throughout
will
our
or will
world.
not shut down.
I will look at each agency. I have no intention of shutting anything down right now, Senator. I am not in that office yet, and if confirmed, I will look at each individual agency and how it should be managed, but counterterrorism right now in our world is vital.
You have said that Department of Justice prosecutors will be prosecuted in the Trump administration. What Department of Justice prosecutors will be prosecuted and why?
I said that on TV. I said prosecutors will be prosecuted, to finish the quote, if bad. Investigators will be investigated. You know, we all take an oath, Senator, to uphold the law. None of us are above the law. Let me give you a really good example of a bad lawyer within the Justice Department, a guy named Klein Smith, who altered a FISA warrant, one of the most important things we can do in this country. So will everyone be held to an equal, fair system of justice? If I am the next Attorney General, absolutely, and no one is above the law.
Under what circumstances will you prosecute journalists for what they write?
I believe in the freedom of speech. Only if anyone commits a crime. It's pretty basic, Senator, with anything, with any victim. And this goes back to my entire career, for 18 years as a prosecutor and then 8 years as Florida's Attorney General. You find the facts of the case, you apply the law in good faith, and you treat everyone fairly.
And it would not be appropriate for a prosecutor to start with a name and look for a crime. It's a prosecutor's job to start with a crime and look for a name, correct?
Senator, I think that is the whole problem with the weaponization that we have seen the last 4 years and what's been happening to Donald Trump. They targeted Donald Trump. They went after him, actually starting back in 2016. They targeted his campaign. They have launched countless investigations against him. That will not be the case if I am Attorney General. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation. Justice will be administered even-handedly throughout this country. Senator, we've got to bring this country back together. We've got to move forward, or we're going to lose our country.
Yeah, I think the concern is that weaponization of the Justice Department may well occur under your tenure. And we want to make sure that that's not the case, that you remain independent, that you remain able to and willing to tell the president no when that's necessary to protect the Constitution and the integrity of the department. So that's where I'm asking these questions. We talked in the meeting about the contacts policy that has prevailed really since Senator Hatch sat in that chair and demanded it of the Clinton Justice Department through all the administration since then, with the exception of a brief period under Attorney General Gonzalez, which he corrected and which did not end well for him. There has been a contacts policy that limits contacts between the White House and the Department of Justice to a very few senior officials on each side. In your role as Attorney General, if you are confirmed, will you maintain, defend, and enforce that longstanding contacts policy?
Senator, yes, I will meet with White House counsel and I will meet with the appropriate officials and follow the contacts policy.
My time has expired. Thank you, Ms. Bondi.
This became a battle over the future of the justice system itself, because the truth is, no prosecutor, no attorney general, no guardian of the law should ever be anywhere near something like an enemy's list. It's one of those ideas that sounds almost too extreme to take seriously, until someone brings it up under oath. Whitehouse wasn't joking. He wasn't exaggerating. He was testing whether a line that should never be crossed was already starting to bend. Bondi said no, of course not. She denied ever keeping such a list. She denied ever hiring anyone who kept one. But the moment she mentioned Kash Patel, everything shifted. Suddenly the room wasn't talking about theory. It was talking about the real-world possibility that someone tied to powerful political forces had publicly floated a concept that should never even be whispered inside the DOJ. That's why Whitehouse pressed. Not because he didn't hear her answers, but because he didn't believe they were strong enough to close the door on something so dangerous. If you've ever studied how democratic systems fail, you know it rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It starts in the gray zones, soft assurances, flexible interpretations, vague promises of fairness. And Whitehouse wanted the country to hear, in that moment, whether she saw the danger clearly or whether the danger was already being normalized. She repeated that there would never be an enemies list. She said justice would always be fair. She insisted that no one would be targeted for political reasons. But as he kept questioning her, something became obvious. These weren't just yes or no questions. He was probing how she thinks about power and whether she understands how quickly justice collapses when loyalty becomes a factor in prosecution. Because when a prosecutor starts with the person and then goes looking for a crime, the entire system flips upside down. And that was the real issue simmering underneath every exchange. Then Whitehouse pivoted, quietly, strategically, to the FBI's national security role. At first, the answers sounded standard. Counterterrorism is vital. Foreign threats are serious. The country must remain vigilant. But then he asked the question that made her tone shift. Would she shut down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work? Suddenly, her confidence changed. Suddenly, it wasn't a firm no. Suddenly, it was a vague promise to look at each agency once she was in office. That was the moment senators leaned forward, because you can't call something vital and then refused to commit to protecting it. And viewers watching understood instantly. A gap had opened between her public reassurances and her willingness to make concrete commitments. But the tension didn't stop there. Whitehouse pressed her again. But this time, he turned the conversation towards something even more explosive. He asked about her comment on television that prosecutors would be prosecuted and investigators would be investigated. On paper, it sounds strong. It sounds like accountability. But the problem has never been whether bad actors should face consequences. It's who gets classified as a bad actor and who gets to decide. Her example was one individual who altered a document. But Whitehouse wasn't looking for examples. He was looking for principles. Because the moment prosecutors start targeting other prosecutors based on politics, the system becomes a weapon. And the viewers in that room knew. You can't build an independent justice system on selective outrage. Bondi insisted that everyone would be treated fairly. But fairness isn't declared. It's demonstrated by how you limit your own power, not how you expand it. Then came the question that made every journalist watching sit up straight. Under what circumstances would she prosecute journalists for what they write? This wasn't a hypothetical. This wasn't a trick question. This was a test of whether she understood the line between criminal conduct and the freedom of the press. She said she believed in free speech, that journalists would only be charged if they committed crimes. But the language was too general, too open, too easy to reinterpret under pressure. History shows that governments don't silence the press by openly banning criticism. They do it by expanding the definition of crime until reporting makes you a suspect. And that's what made Whitehouse push further. Not because he doubted her personally, but because power changes incentives, and incentives change decisions. But perhaps the most important moment of the entire hearing came next, and millions of viewers missed its significance. Whitehouse asked about the contacts policy, the rule that limits communication between the White House and the DOJ. Most people don't realize how crucial that policy is. It's the invisible barrier that prevents political figures from quietly influencing prosecutions behind the scenes. When that barrier cracks, everything else follows. Bondi said she would follow it. She said she would meet only with appropriate officials. But again, Whitehouse didn't stop there. He asked the question that defines every attorney general. Would she be willing to say no to the president when necessary? Saying you follow the rules doesn't mean much if you don't enforce them when they collide with political expectations. And in that moment, the hearing room wasn't evaluating her resume. It was evaluating her backbone. Because here's the truth. Hearings like this aren't about exposing lies or scoring political points. They're about building a public record, a list of commitments made before someone takes office so that later, when decisions are made in private, those promises can be held up against real actions. It's not suspicion. It's accountability. And Whitehouse was laying down markers that future oversight can rely on. What made this exchange so gripping wasn't shouting or drama. It was the tension between reassurance and uncertainty, between promises and hesitation. Bondi said all the right phrases, but Whitehouse was measuring what she didn't say, what she avoided, and what she struggled to state plainly. The fear isn't that she openly intends to misuse power. The fear is that systems fail when leaders believe they're correcting past injustices rather than creating new ones. The fear is that a prosecutor's oath is only as strong as their willingness to apply it against their own side when necessary. And that's the deeper warning people should take from this hearing. Institutions don't collapse because someone announces their intentions. They collapse because norms erode silently, through exceptions, hesitations, and reassurances that sound comforting but lack clarity. That's why Whitehouse kept pressing. He wasn't challenging her competence. He was testing whether she understood the gravity of the position she seeks, whether she recognizes that power must be limited even when used by people who believe they are doing the right thing. In the end, what viewers witnessed wasn't an argument between two political figures. It was a stress test for the justice system itself. And depending on how you interpret her answers, the results should make every citizen pay attention. Because the strength of the DOJ has never depended on one person. It depends on the boundaries that person is willing to enforce, especially when no one else is in the room. That if you care about how power really works behind the scenes, about the guardrails that keep justice neutral, and about what these hearings reveal long before decisions are made, make sure you stick with this channel. Drop your thoughts below, share this video to keep the conversation going, And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a breakdown of the moments that shape how our institutions truly operate.